All right. Audio. Checking my audio. I think we're good. Hey, fam. Welcome to Whiteboard Fire, where we're going to break down today building an unstoppable brand story. Now, feel free to chime in throughout this training. I'll try to get to your questions, your comments, but definitely engage. You're here. You're spending time. So let's get something out of it. I want to make sure that you leave here understanding exactly, specifically, and precisely how to build an unstoppable brand story. Now, before we really dig into it and this idea of brand and story, for all of you, whether you're doing the replay or you're here live, definitely let me know you're in the building. Give a shout out. Tell me where you're from, what city you're repping, where you at, or just say, what's up, X? Give me that love, give me some vibe, give me some energy, and let's return it. And I'm making sure we'll engage and pull this through. But again, this is going to be a fire one right here. The unstoppable brand story. Now, let's break it down real quick. There are two key differentiators, and we talked about this last week during our training. When we think about our brand or root differentiators, we have our brand value, or brand values, and then we have our business value. And this is just a recap of what we went over last week. If you weren't here last week, I went deeper into the differentiation between the two. But just to recap real quick, business value is about accessing money today, right? And who doesn't want money today? But there's a challenge with making money today. You have to really focus on two key things: your functions of your product and service and the features. That's what business value is tied to, the utility of what you do for your clients. Those who have a very clear business message, we went over 7 key items in clarifying your message with the one message rule last week. So check that out. But it's functions and features. And you need that so that people can remove friction in deciding whether or not they want to do business with you. But we're here today to talk about brand values. This is about making money tomorrow. This is about building a relationship, a connection, an emotional bond with your audience. Now, for everybody out there, you think about the emotional bond you have with your audience and all the places where you spend money, where you spend money often, where you spend a lot of money, where you go to time and time again. I promise you, it won't be purely based upon functions and features. It will be because of brand values, meaning the way that that brand makes you feel. How you feel when you consume that product. It's feeling versus functions and features. Now, these feelings, and I have here on the screen a big V and a little v. This is something to consider and think about, really kind of entrenching your sensibilities in this idea of what branding is. The little v is value. Right? It's value. You have value, I have value. I have money, I'm going to exchange it for your value, the utility, functions, and features. But brand is about big V, as in values. The values that connect me and bond me to you, your products, and your services that go beyond the actual functions and features of the product. So if we think about iconic brands like, say, Nike. Nike, just like Reebok or Adidas, it's leather bound together with glue and rubber. It's just these raw materials that are basically commodities. But for whatever reason, Nike has an associated, irreplaceable what? Feeling that we connect to, or at least I do, and I will buy Nikes every day, all day, as opposed to, say, Adidas. Same product. The quality isn't vastly different for me to consume every bit of my sneaker budget on Nike, but it's an irreplaceable feeling that I get with Nike and its brand. In other words, the values, the big V, is pushing me to want to consume their product and to stay a part of that brand ecosystem. From the clothes, the athletic wear, the whole nine. So big V, brand values, multiplies business value, little v. in terms of really being able to make a lot more money tomorrow. And the reason I put tomorrow down is because it takes time to build brand. It takes time to put something into effect. And we're going to talk about how to do that and to build your unstoppable brand story. But let's go to the next slide here, and let's kind of evaluate where we are on this continuum of being a commodity or a brand. All right, and I want you to kind of do this real time. Be as honest and open with yourself as you can possibly be. You're going to give yourself a check in the yes column or a check in the no column for each of these questions. There are 8 key questions I have here for you, and let's go through them real quick. Number 1, and I want you to ask this question: can my product or service be easily substituted? If you're an accountant, could your customer easily go to the accountant down the street and get the same service? If you're a tax consultancy, you're doing taxes, can your client simply just go to H&R Block or down the street? If you're a coach or consultant, you're a life coach, right? Life coach. Could somebody potentially just go to another executive coach who is certified with the same credentials and basically swap you out? Is your product or service easily substituted? If you have technology, if you are a SaaS company, if you are competing in the marketplace, which we all are, and it's crowded, can you, be honest, simply be swapped it out and substituted? Check yes or no. All right, number 2, let's break it down. Features and functions. Do you trade primarily on features and functions, meaning the utility of what it is that you offer, right? Our widget does this, and this, and that's primarily why people buy from you. Be honest, right? Is it about your features and functions? If yes, check yes. If no, check no. All right? Number 3, heavily price conscious, meaning your customers. I get on the call with prospective clients all the time, and one of the things we talk about is just how price conscientious their customers are. Well, are they? If you were to raise your prices by 15-20% tomorrow, would everybody flip out and jump off the ship? Or would you find closing deals infinitely harder? Or do you feel a high degree of price pressure to be below your competition? If there's a heavily price conscious market that you are in, or at least you feel, put a yes here or no. Number 4, sensitive to availability. What do I mean by that? Meaning, if your products are not available, then your customers just go somewhere else. If your inventory is low or your schedule is filled up, well, people simply say, hey, all right, that's fine. I'm going to go get it somewhere else. Meaning there's a sensitivity to availability. If you don't have availability, that dollar is gone. Mark yes or no in that column. All right, number 5, high customer turnover or churn. If each month or each week or whatever your cycle is, when that contract or that product cycle is done, do you find yourself having to go out and run and find a new client? Is there a high degree of customer turnover? Yes or no? All right, number 6, do you find yourself always hunting for customers? Do you always have to go on the offensive and hunt to bring in customers? Yes or no? All right. And number 6, do you have to hardcore close? Do you have to hardcore close to close people when it comes to buying your services? Do you have that aggressive sales team on the other end who has to use all of the hardcore closing tactics, and you go through sales training and you smash those phones and you follow up like crazy and you close? I'm all for closing. But for here, just yes or no, do you rely heavily on the hardcore close? Yes or no? All right. And do your customers buy primarily based on need? Meaning people buy your products and services because they need it. Not necessarily because they want it, but because they need it. Yes or no? Now, when you're looking at this, you'll have a score at the end. Score and tally all of your yeses. There are 8 questions, so maybe your ratio is 3 yeses and 5 nos, which means you have more of a brand. If this side of the column is higher, you're moving toward building brand. If this side is higher, then you're more in the commodity space. Now, this isn't about judgment. This is just about where we are with things. And if you have any questions while we're live, definitely put it into the chat box and I'll try to answer it. But look at yourself honestly. And if you're doing the replay, what's your score in the yes column? Put a score. I'm a 3 with a yes and then a 5 on the no. Let's take a look at it. Let's be honest and transparent about where we are. I'm not a perfect 8 in terms of brand on this scale, by no means. And it's about the evolution and progression and growing into getting more in this side of the column, right? But these are just 8 questions that they're not the exhaustive final list of whether you're a commodity or a brand, but these are 8 instructive questions because if you can be substituted, yeah, you're a commodity. If you trade basically on features and functions, commodity. If people are highly price conscious, commodity. If people are sensitive to availability, commodity again. If there's high turnover and churn, that means people are consuming and gone. They have no reason to stay. They're going to go find the next best deal and they exit, right? Commodity. If you have to always hunt and you're never being hunted, commodity. Brands, people go seek them out. They are being hunted, right? And if you have to hardcore close, that means your marketing and your branding isn't up to snuff. And I'll give you an example. When we think of McDonald's, does the kid working behind the counter have to close you on buying something? No. You don't walk into McDonald's and hey, you want a Big Mac? I'm telling you, Big Macs are awesome. Look, double patties, this nasty ass mayonnaise sauce, right? I hate Big Macs. But no one has to sell. No one has to close. Why? Because the brand has done all of the heavy lifting. You've already made the decision. When you walk in the door, you already are ready to buy. It's just a matter of what you're going to buy. Because the brand has already what? Created a feeling and an expectation in us around what it is that they have to offer. And we feel very comfortable whether we're going into a McDonald's in California or all the way in Thailand, that we're going to be getting that brand, that expectation, that promise that comes with McDonald's. So if you have to hardcore close, you may not have a brand, meaning an irreplaceable feeling that people have come to expect and want and desire. And now you have to push and punch them in the face to get them to say yes. And if people are buying primarily out of need, then especially in times like this, where every discretionary dollar, because of the economy and where things are, you're basically a commodity. But the things that we want, we'll find a way. We'll find a budget. How many of you have things in your life? You will find a way to buy it regardless of what's going on. And that's how you know you're connected to a brand. If you're going to run to a very specific product with a very specific brand and not the generic, it's irreplaceable. And why? Whether you've evaluated it or not, it comes down to this key thing: feelings. And that's what brand is. And that's the key root element to building a brand story. So let's break that down real quick. Let's break that down. Here is a chart I want you to let seep into your veins, right? This is going to be one of those ones that if you can bring this into understanding and awareness for you, whether you are a small business, a solopreneur, a future entrepreneur, or you're running a large corporation and you really want to understand the essence of brand and story, this diagram will help you to do just that. So let's break it down. All right, we talked about it. What is brand? Brand is about feeling. If you want to decrypt branding and make it simple and easy to understand what it is that you're trying to do when you're branding, all you're trying to do is to create, or rather make, maintain, and multiply a very specific feeling as it relates to your products or services. If you can do that, you are branding. You're branding. And you are maximizing that big V in values, because this is the intangible aspect of the consumption cycle. Again, going back to Nike as my example, leather, glue, shoelaces, commodities, mere materials that can be found anywhere, and there are hundreds of other manufacturers out there building shoes. But the values, the intangible side of feeling connected to being an athlete and the star power and all the stuff that comes with just do it, down the list from Apple to even Amazon these days is building brand awareness with their rebrand. I'll talk about that in the future Whiteboard Fire. But all the brands that we love, that we consume, that we're connected to. For example, my Garmin watch. People asked me yesterday, you got on that yellow watch. I just have a yellow band. It's a Garmin watch. This watch costs like $900. That's ridiculous. But why did I buy it? Why didn't I go with an Apple Watch or something like that? Because Garmin is for athletes. Garmin has this connection, at least in my mind, my spirit, this feeling, let me change the color here, this feeling of being a real athlete. You Apple Watch users are not real athletes. My wife has an Apple Watch. No disrespect, but this means I'm a real athlete, right? That's not necessarily true, but I feel it. And that's what matters, and that's why I spend a premium, and that's why you spend a premium, because we know that feeling comes with that, whether we're conscious of it or not. So I promise you, if you take anything away from this when you're thinking about brand, and there are millions of articles out there and thousands of blueprints and all the other shit, you want to build brand, focus on feeling. What do people feel about you, your services, your products, and what you do? If there's no feeling, you are a commodity. Period. That is what brand is about. Now, the second part, story, this is a conduit for pushing brand into people's vein. But let's break down before we get into how that actually works. What is a story? A story is nothing more than a narrative that informs people of a transformation. A lot of us think of stories as once upon a time this happened, then this happened, just a chronological unfolding of events. That's not a story, or at least it's not a good story. A great story is a transformation, right? A narrative that helps us to communicate a transformation. So the key word here, as I said, is transformation. Transformation, which tells us a key component of building a brand story, an unstoppable brand story. It is a feeling of transformation. That's what a brand story is. If you can communicate in such a way and create an experience around your products, around your services, around your touch points, around your culture, all of it. If you can create an experience that gives people a feeling of transformation, you're building an unstoppable brand story. Presumably, and this is key, the feeling is desirable. This is what somebody actually wants. And the transformation is you're showing them how to get from their current state to this highly desired state, which you have associated to your brand. That's all a brand story is, a feeling of transformation. Now let's go back to Nike. What did Phil Knight do from the beginning? He didn't talk about the shoes. He didn't talk about the technologies. He didn't talk about all the innovation they had inside of their shoes. If you go read, forget what it's called. He has a great book, Something Dog. I'll get it by the end of this, right? Go read that book. From the beginning, it was like, let me get my shoes on the best athletes. Let me get it on Prefontaine and these others, right? And while they were wearing them, his shoes, his brand, people believed that they too could be that star. They believed that they could have this feeling of being an unstoppable athlete. They could be someone who pushed the boundaries of what it means to exist. They could be a rule breaker. They could be a star. And Nike is the conduit to transform your life into that. And all we have to do is make sure that our brand experience tells that story. You get it? Is it starting to kind of click here? So yesterday in our live training, we went over 3 stories, and I invite you to go back to that. I'm not going to go into detail here in this training. 3 stories that you want to have in your back pocket that are about this feeling I'm talking about and transformation. The first one is the founder story. The founder story is about you, who you are, why you exist, and why you are a worthy guide in someone else's story. Right? That's it. Right? Especially for us small business owners who we're typically not trading purely on functions and features. The big boys are squeezing us out through automation, through scale, and they are taking features and functions off the table through SaaS products, through a myriad of things. We are feeling that pressure as a small business community. But the one thing that those big guys can't do is they can't trade on feeling. If we're able to share our story and people choose us because we are worthy guides, because we've been through what they've been through. We've experienced what they have experienced. And when we share our story, our unfolding, our growth, our what? Transformation, there's a bond, a connection, a trust that makes them say, I choose you, right? Over these other guys who may have better features and functions. Your founder story, all right? The second story is your customer story. This is how you what? Transform the customer's life. The feeling that the customer gets by going through your process, consuming your widget and your product. Can you or do you have powerful customer stories that showcase the transformation that someone is experiencing with or through your products and services? So many of you, when I get on the phone and we're talking, or we're going through some Zoom consulting and we're looking at the brand and I go to your website, customer story is not there. All you do is promise this heaven. But remember, a story is about transformation. So we have to have some key elements. We have to have some pain, and we have to showcase how our product and services lead to pleasure. A transformation which then gives the customer a certain feeling. You understand? So you don't simply say, I got Ted 15, 20% more productivity in his life. Feels like a feature and function to me. But if you tell a story about Ted, how Ted was struggling with his productivity, and as a leader in his business, he was having to let people go. And he felt like such a failure because if he could find a way to improve the business by just 20%, he could keep his whole staff on board through this pandemic. So we worked with him and we improved his efficiency in these 3 key areas. Ted seen an immediate boost to productivity. He was able to bring in more money, and he was able to keep all of his people on staff. And Ted, he says it, if it wasn't for Legion's story and X, I don't know where we would be. And I'm so grateful because the promise we made to our customers and to our team, we've been able to hold strong too. And that's invaluable. I feel secure. I feel empowered to know that when I share my story, we'll find a way to make it through any storm. That is a story. That is a feeling. Legion story X, there's a feeling associated with how I do what I do. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but as the chief of story, there's a certain ethic that comes to it. Like I was on 4 Zoom calls yesterday with prospective clients, 4 of them. And every single one of them said the same thing about me because they were recently introduced to me and they saw some videos and they all use this one keyword, this buzzword. If you're going through the replay or live now, type in what you think that keyword is, and I'll tell you at the end because it is a very purposeful thing that's part of my story, part of my ethic, and I'm going to be sharing something toward the end on how you can find the same thing in your world. But getting back to it. All right, getting back to it. So we have our founder story, we have our customer story, and we have our mission story. Our mission story is what we stand for in the world. right? Remember, these are all values of feeling and intangible. Well, the mission is where you're going. What are you seeking to do? Why do you exist? If you didn't exist, how would the world be different? What are you fighting for? Right? If you don't have a mission, especially in today's day and age, you are cup half full. Because so many consumers are choosing not based upon necessity, not choosing based upon functions and features, not even choosing based upon superficial feelings. They're going deep, right? They're woke, right? What's social good, social impact? What do you stand for? What are you fighting for? How are you making this world a better place? The younger the audience, the more important that is. So what do you stand for? What's your story, and what feeling can you evoke and connect to your brand through telling a story of transformation? The world exists like this, and we exist to make it like that. Transformation. There's an arc. And by the way, this diagram was put this way on purpose because there's a what? There's an arc to every story. Pain, problems, and then there's some middle stuff that happens, and then boom, transformation station. You get it? Now, one last point before we move on about these stories, if you haven't connected the dots on this. The founder story is past, the customer story is present, and the mission story is future. There are different times to share different stories based upon where you are, depending upon the product and services you have, depending upon the power you have in each of these categories. So you got to understand that. But generally speaking, it's a good idea to have all three of these stories well practiced, drilled, and rehearsed, and then pushed into every aspect of your marketing and your branding effort. Our founders, and by the way, if you're on this call and you're like, I'm not a founder, well, you are a founder. You're a part of something. Why are you a part of something? And what has your experience in the past taught you or helped you to experience that makes you the perfect fit and or guide for that product or service? I can't tell you how important that is for salesmen out there or sales ladies. What's the proper word these days for salesmen? The politically correct. I don't know. But you get what I'm trying to say. So this is valuably important. Now, one last point for all you hawks out there, and I come across them every day. Man, branding is not valuable. It's not. It's a waste of time. Let's go get that money. And I get it. I'm all about making some money, right? We got to do that because if you don't make money, and we're going to talk about that later, you won't be able to build brand. You have to make money. But here's the key thing I want you to consider and pull this in to your world. Remember I talked about values, the feeling of brand? Well, the feeling of brand and values, if it's not connected to value, as in utility of features and functions, a tradable service that people want, right? Then you can't convert brand into dollars. You can't convert brand into business. So the place you want to be isn't with them separated like this. You want to be in this Venn diagram space where there's overlap. You have these values that are connecting everyone to that business value, an exchangeable inventory, a valuable inventory that people want to exchange money for. And so many of us who are really good at building brand and connection and feeling, we are not good at connecting that maybe to business value, right? Scalable, exchangeable, valuable inventory that we can exchange. So you got to have both. And when you have both, this is where you're able to make more money because now that values feeling brand multiplies business value. Get it? All right. So let's bring this to a head. Let's pull this in and make this tangible for everybody out there. Whether you're a huge business or you're a solopreneur just starting out. What is brand? Say it with me. Feeling. What is story? Transformation. If you get anything from this, feelings of transformation, when you sit back and think about everything you're doing, it comes down to that. When you're able to create a feeling of transformation, it is like having an apple tree. And what do I mean by apple tree? Well, it's the fruit. You've planted the roots that create the fruit. And the importance of having an apple as a fruit, as a metaphor, is this. When you break open that apple, what's inside? Seeds. And each of those seeds falls to the ground and plants what? Another apple tree. Brand, especially when you're telling story, you want to get it to the point where it is a almost self-fulfilling prophecy, a virtuous cycle where the fruit that you produce begets more fruit. But how do you do that, and what does that look like? Well, there are 3 steps in general. Somebody has to plant the seed. You have to. What feeling do you actually want to create, and what are the stories that you want to tell, and how do we plant the seed in the hearts and minds of everybody? Not some people, but everybody who is connected to our brand. That means internally and externally. That means our leaders, our staff, our employees, our vendors even, and especially with the market. Someone has to plant that seed. We'll talk about that in just a second. Then someone has to nurture that seed or plant that seed, and then they have to nurture it until it grows. And when it grows, it becomes this fruit. And that is the process of building an unstoppable brand. It doesn't happen on accident because you're building brand inside out. And so many of us, we focus on one part of the brand story, which is the story we tell to the market. But in my experience, that is a very exhausting proposition and short-lived, because if the story isn't congruent and fully aligned inside out, you're going to bend and contort to try to keep up the illusion of that market story, the feeling you're trying to produce. It's like, let's go back to Nike again. Let's beat this horse. If Nike is about just do it, pushing the boundaries, pushing one's potential, and then internally, they're a conservative organization, super conservative, rigid, by the rules, by the book, every little thing, dot I's, cross T's. How would that work? How would the staff, how would that eventually trickle down to the product? And then how would that eventually trickle down to the messaging and the marketing and the branding? It wouldn't. This incongruence around internal and external forces would ultimately be the ruin and the destruction of a brand. But the best brands are built inside out. And that's the key thing I want to leave you with this last slide in this training, is this. It looks like this. Let's recap it. Let's bring it all to a head. Feeling, transformation, right? We want to be able to carry story synergy inside out of our organization. So how do we do that? We want to make sure that the brand experience that we influence is fully through the entirety of what we do. Not just a marketing message, not just a way to get people to open their wallets. We can do that, but we will ultimately fail or ruin our brand if we're just focused on that. But I understand there's practical realities where we have to make money, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So it starts with leaderships, leading a vision and a mission that motivates, inspires, and transforms. That's the seed. Then that leadership has to cultivate that seed through a high-performance teamwork and culture that outpaces the competition, because people believe, brought together by a common bond, a common story, a common idea, a common ethic, right? You bring people in who fit that. So now you have culture. Now you develop products and services that are not only a good fit for the market that you serve, but they also are a good fit for what? Your internal culture, right? Which allows you to create powerful stories in your marketing, because now you don't just tell stories about what's happening outside of your organization in terms of getting people to buy, but you can also tell stories in terms of what's happening inside of your organization. Remember I talked about the power of mission story and the power of founder's story? Well, what would happen in a small organization, and we've done the experiment here, on a small scale, but it proved itself out. You have 200 people in your organization, and right now you have a marketing department that's ran by Bob. And Bob is overworked and trying to find a way to keep, attention on the business. And he's trying to create content, but the content is kind of dead, right? He's trying to put that out there and build brand, but it's not really working. Why? Because Bob hasn't galvanized, energized, synergized the branding to tell every perspective of the story. So Bob needs to pull the founder in of the company to tell his story or her story. Bob also needs to go into the product development side and get the product development engineer to tell the story of why he or she is excited about the next level of product. Bob also needs to interview customers and help them to tell their story, right? And all of these stories need to come back to the same exact or precise or ballpark-like feeling and showcase the same level of transformation so there's an alignment inside out. Now Bob has an infinite amount of stories to tell. He doesn't have to fabricate anything because now he's just what? Documenting. And this is, I think, one of the things that Gary Vee talks about heavily is stop trying to fabricate and create content and document. When you start to understand the feeling you're trying to produce and the transformation that you stand for, right? Your product or service and in this world, you now, if you're living it, you can now what? Tell that story inside out. And that's the power of having story synergy, because your marketing and your branding now can be opened up to so many different possibilities, which then empowers your sales team because they're going to be getting on the phone or connecting with highly enthusiastic, informed people who what? Feel a certain way and have already convinced themselves that they want to buy. The salespeople at that point are just there to what? Close the deal by offering the options. This is story synergy, inside out, creating a brand story experience. And if you can do this, regardless of how small or big your organization is, it has the potential to create an unstoppable brand. Now, Lead Your Story is about that. That's what we do at Lead Your Story, my company. And we finally have one client where we're doing a full life cycle of this entire initiative, and I'm excited about that to see where that goes. Now, if you're a larger organization of 50 plus employees and you want to be in our pilot program, we're looking for 2 more, and you want to go through this process, because we've done this side a dozen times, 100 times with our Rise of a Leader company. And then we've done this side with our branding and marketing and sales. But now, I'm proud to announce, we are doing story synergy and bringing them all together. And I would love for you to be a part of that. So message me, I'll give you the number afterwards. But if you are a big business and you want to find a way to do story synergy and be one of our case studies, we got a nice little pilot program. I'm telling you. But for many of you, you may be smaller businesses and you say, hey, X, I want to focus on my marketing story. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about developing your brand story so that you can go out there in the world and market. You also might want to work on your sales story, right? We have a thing called story selling. And for some of you, you may say, hey, how do I develop my products and services and get the story of what that looks like? So for example, we just helped one of our clients launch a new product line for her leadership development. And all we did was pull apart her stuff, her story, and then put it into a pragmatic framework for service delivery. We had another client last year who did that and was able to triple his business by us breaking apart the aspects of his business, his process, and then pulling it into a finite deliverable product or service. The point I'm trying to make is that there is a place on this continuum, whether you're big or small, that we might be able to find a way to work with you. So let me give you a way to do that real quick. I'm going to be taking 15 of you on for a free discovery call where we evaluate your business and look at your brand and offer up some advice. And all you have to do is text me at 800-425-2095 and put in the word call so I know what you're looking for. I can only promise that to 15 people, and it's about availability more than anything else. But when you do that, what you're going to do onboarding form, you put in your contact information, then we'll go through your brand property, the website, your social media, then we look at your positioning, right? Describe your offer, what about, describing your perfect customer, what is your primary business, and how can I help you. Just basically, I want to really know your business, so I don't give you generic advice. You give access to my calendar. Right, we'll book it. I'll look at all the information, and then we're going to provide value. Book the appointment, 15 minutes. We're going to talk about how we can find a way to help you in some key area of this story synergy to help you build an unstoppable brand so that you make more impact and more money. Does that make sense? So I invite you to call, text me, 800-425-2095, keyword call, to get access, 15 minutes on the calendar, and I will definitely provide value. We'll jump on that call. But again, it's limited to the first 15. And last but not least, if you are watching this on a replay, do me a favor. Give this a thumbs up, like, comment, share, and definitely tune in next week where I'm going to be going over story marketing, right? Story marketing, my 4-step plan for getting attention in sales, right? You can write it down on a napkin. So if you're a small guy, you're like, Alex, how do I do this? Come tune in next week for our Whiteboard Fire. We're going to be going over our 4C marketing plan. But the thing is, I don't know if I'm going to be doing 10 a.m. Pacific time. I may be doing it in the evening or later in the afternoon. So text me if you want the real update schedule, or just see me online and look at my YouTube, Facebook, whatever it may be. But if you want to get real-time updates, text live, LIVE, to 800-425-2095. All right? And one more ask of you. Our Yellow Chair podcast, my labor of love, the internal game, the story, the development, like all of that. You can go on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, iHeart, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcast, type in Yellow Chair. You go to my face, so you're in, check it out, give me a review. I appreciate it. I want to be able to impact everybody's lives out there. I think the inner game in the world, a story, and what we believe about ourselves and others is so much important. All right, so check me out there, and if you want to get real-time access to that and get a link and all that good stuff, we have some bonus material in the inner game world. Type the word yellow when you text me 800-425-2095. All right. So, hey, this is the unstoppable brand, right? And to take things further, you just got to put it into play. Keyword, feeling and transformation. Oh, I had the eraser on. Feeling and transformation. That is the brand story. Focus on that. And if you want some help with that, definitely text me, message me. Look, your story is important, and communicating it can transform the landscape of your business and your life. But we have to master our story so that we can stand out, stand up, be seen, be felt, and be heard. I'm X, and I'm out.